She's a real estate agent. She lives in Charleston's Ansonborough neighborhood. And now, Angela Drake wants to represent citizens of Charleston City Council's District 1 seat, Daniel Island, and parts of downtown Charleston next year on Charleston City Council. I sat down exclusively with Angela for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and download my free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Angela Drake, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. I'm pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you greatly. Obviously, you are a real estate agent and a downtown Charleston resident, but now you want to run and represent the residents of District 1 on Charleston City Council.
Yes, I do.
Why Angela Drake? Why now?
Why now? I've spent over 15 years in the real estate industry, actually 20, but I've spent 15 years serving the community. Actually, you ask why District 1? It's because 21 years ago, I was in the fields in a trailer selling Daniel Island. I've seen it from the growth, from the dream to the reality. I've been a part of the commercial development, the residential, and the community. I was there when the first church was built, Bishop England, the ground broke on that, and I've been there for 21 years, seeing the island develop and grow. And 10 years into that, I happened to get married at the age of 43. And Mr. Drake didn't want to be Mr. Daniel Island, so we moved downtown. And so therefore we became involved in the Ansonborough community. And I became the president of the historic Ansonborough Neighborhood Association, which made me learn what we needed and how we needed to get involved in our community and the city. And we had little things going on in Ansonborough, like the cruise ships, hotel development, the Clemson Architectural Center. We had a lot of business that needed tending. And so we have a very good neighborhood association, a very active, that is actually a good partner. We have one of the best partnerships with the French Quarter. Susan Bass, who's the president of the French Quarter. Excellent. And so therefore, community involvement, civic involvement, as well as involvement in both communities. District 1 is a hybrid, and I'm a perfect hybrid example of that.
And you know, the Daniel Island News did an actual article with you just recently. You said this quote, "As a person who's benefited so much from this community, I feel compelled to take my service to the next level." Talk to me more about your service.
True. That quote actually came from my grandfather.
Okay.
We glean so much and benefit so much from our community. It's time to give back at any time. And giving back means being involved in the Daniel Island Rotary, which I'm president-elect of. We have several community services, including the duck race every year.
Oh, yes.
June the 6th, by the way. And also by giving through civic involvement, whether it's attending the BZAZ, the BAR. It's as simple as being able to attend city council, which I do on a quite frequent basis. It's important to be involved with our city leaders because we have discussions before they hit City Hall. We have conversations that are important to have relationships with others that we can develop. So that's my involvement.
You talk about City Hall. Obviously, this is developing news coming from City Hall. And this is from Michaela Porter of the Post and Courier. The Charleston Dutch Dialogue's 252-page report recommends piloting changes on East Side and give a private sector involvement. If you were on City Council today, what type of involvement would you want the private sector to be involved with this?
The Dutch Dialogues or
Yes,
the East Side? Those are two specific, separate conversations. So do you want to discuss the East Side first or the Dutch Dialogues?
Let me reread that.
Yes, I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, the Charleston Dutch Dialogue's 252-page report on flooding recommends piloting changes on the East Side and private sector involvement. If you were on City Council today, what would you vote for?
Well, right now, actually tonight at 5 p.m. at Gilliard is the conclusion of the Dutch Dialogues. And I would actually like to hear the conclusion of their report and study that before giving an educated opinion on that. Right now, I think the public entity and the private entities' involvement with both are important because Charleston that's the history of Charleston, that's the nature of Charleston, that's the current culture of Charleston, is that for private entities, whether it's through local resources, the city, and others come together in order to support a community, to support an effort. to support something that is happening right now, whether it's on the east side, the Dutch dialogues, the flooding, some things that are happening within our city itself. It's a hands-on city, and that's where those conversations and relationships come into play.
What type of conversations are you having with citizens now when it comes to the future of the low battery?
Well, right now, in fact, City Council just passed an ordinance or an acceleration to go to the State Infrastructure Bank for funding.
Right.
That's important. The battery is an economic resource. It's part of it's part of the DOT. It's part of that road system.
Right.
So going to the DOT, going to other state and federal funding source resources is important.
Let me talk to you about rooftop bars. Current Charleston City Council member Harry Griffin wrote this on his Facebook page. He says this, quote, "Just curious, what are your thoughts on rooftop bars and restaurants?" He said this, quote, "I was upset last night that an ordinance to heavily regulate these businesses ended up on our agenda without any feedback from the general public or the business impacted. I called one of those businesses today and they were shocked." What type of feedback are you hearing from restaurants? Because you have a lot of restaurants in your district.
We do, and I was actually in attendance at that meeting, and this was an issue that was debated amongst City Council, thus it was deferred, because they do need to go back. They're recommending taking it back to the Hotel Task Ordinance Committee, and therefore by taking it back, perhaps there will be more public dialogue from the stakeholders who have a vested interest in the hotels, in the restaurants, in the development, but also from the neighborhood associations as well. When you have any other task force, whether it's a short-term rental,
Right.
whether it's the late night task force, whether it's the task force to lower temperatures for horses, there's always public input and dialogue. And perhaps when the task force convenes again, there'll be the opportunity for the others to participate.
The hotel task force, obviously you're not on that task force at all, but if you were on there or give any recommendations, what recommendations would you give right now?
Right now, the Hotel Task Force has done a great job in crafting the current ordinance, but as crafting takes place, further tweaking needs to take place within the ordinance. And I believe that with this ordinance, by deferring it, it's just going to be massaged more. A lot of the council members wanted it to go to third reading for that to be passed. And there's a lot of debate of moving forward or reading amongst the neighborhood communities. The reading should have happened, and amongst the other organizations, it needed to be deferred. I see a meeting of the minds at some point on this. It's interesting during an election cycle that it is a topic of debate, but it's one that we do need to address.
And obviously, as you sit and live in Ansonborough neighborhood, there's a lot of tourism down there. What is the future of tourism in Charleston in your mind?
There's a lot of tourism everywhere. It's a booming force behind our city. I think the balance is the tourism and residential remaining residential areas in the city need to retain that residential fabric, that livability. You grew up here, right? Yes. And a lot of those who live here remember Charleston way back when. A lot of people come here because of Charleston and its history and its heritage and its culture. And at the same time, we need to retain the nature of why we live and choose this lifestyle in Charleston. Charleston's the best place you could live on earth. And it is a place that we value, and we value our residential neighborhoods. I do live in an area with a lot of tourism. Ansonborough and French Quarter are right in the thick of it. And it's wonderful that we can work together as a neighborhood with the city, with the tourism industry, to maintain that balance. And that balance involves everything from cruise ships to the number of flights that come into town. I was just at a meeting with breakfast with Paul Campbell this morning. Everyone's doing their job and doing a good job of communicating that let's retain the nature of Charleston, the history of Charleston. And as long as we're communicating amongst each other, there's good hope for the future that we'll retain that.
Also in Ansonborough, there's always a talk about carriages. And most people think it's the Charleston Animal Society versus the carriages. Where are you with this discussion?
Well, interestingly enough, I served on the committee that discussed carriage routes, animal temperatures, and it is always interesting to see the balance between both. And there is no one side for me to take, because I've been in discussion and in a room where you have carriage company owners, operators, franchise owners, and you have neighborhoods together. And hopefully through the route committee, we reached a good way to work together. Dan Riccio, of course, is over livability,
Right.
and he was there. And there's still more discussion to come, because you have to think about this. What's going to happen when the hotel starts developing on the old First Baptist lot, on the Samara property, as we call it now? That's going to be 110 rooms there, and that's right across from the stables. And I think we all need to be concerned about the welfare of the animals when that construction starts. And that's a question for the industry too, and for the city. How are they going to work with these groups in maintaining the livability aspect of the neighborhood, of the carriage companies, and of the health of the horses?
What is the well-being of the horses and mules in your mind?
Making sure they're safe, protected, brought in at the proper levels. I have many friends who are equestrians, and they disagree with the treatment of horses. And, as long as the industry continues, we must maintain a watch to make sure that the horses are safe and healthy and happy.
It is the second most attraction in Charleston as far as the horses and mules and carriages. Why do you think they are being scrutinized right now in your mind?
Is it really the second? Where did that study come from?
Oh, from most of the people I spoke with in the neighborhood.
Oh, okay. I'm more of a scientific.
And I get to ask the questions. So why is it? What's going on here?
I have to respectfully disagree with that question.
But what's the problem? What is this all about? Why now? Because most of these carriages have been in business for 40 years.
Honestly, it's right now, I don't see that as the why now question, as the biggest question. The biggest question right now tends to be with the hotel ordinance and the rooftop ordinance. The horse carriage industry, once they got their routes into play, and once the health and welfare groups of the horses are monitoring, they're monitoring it every day and very closely. So, and the city is watching the routes, making sure that the stability of the horses is there, and hopefully working closely with the horse welfare groups, the Animal Society. I see that as an issue that's on the horizon because of this new development. That's what I see as an issue.
Okay. Now, a lot of people I talk to say, hey, well, again, it's one of the most popular attractions in Charleston. And some people feel like, why is it being targeted by so-called taxpayer organizations? When you hear that, what do you say?
I haven't heard that.
Okay. Is it fair?
I would have to look at the assessment of the question.
Okay. Most people, obviously, and a lot of these people, most of those businesses pay taxes to the government. What is the ultimate goal here? Would you all want to work together with the carriages to come to a common goal?
Well, are we talking state or federal taxes? That's the question, because I don't believe our state money goes to the carriage industry. They, in fact, pay franchise fees to the city
Right.
in order to operate here. They also have a separate franchise agreement with the cleanup services that they have. And so the city benefits from, not tremendously from those franchise agreements, so I have to question of how my tax dollars go to pay for the carriage industry.
You talked earlier about Dan Riccio. Obviously, he's the director of livability and tourism for the city of Charleston. And just recently, as you know, he's trying to get the city council to give a special ordinance where if something like severe weather were to happen, he will have the authority to shut it down. Do you agree with that?
Certainly.
Okay.
Certainly. There has to be a point of contact. There has to be something when a crisis, such as a hurricane, 115-degree weather, there has to be a point of contact, just like there is with any department, the chief of police, the fire chief, the mayor, the governor. There has to be someone that has a gauge of, this is serious. This is serious to the welfare of humans out there that are on those carriages. We have to look at liability purposes for the drivers, for the people that are on there, but also for the welfare of those horses. Because if there is a crisis, they have to pull those horses out. They have to get them out from downtown, and they have to do that in a timely manner. So, of course, there should be a point of contact for that, and someone who has the resources with the various departments, because they all do come together when there is a crisis, and they make the decision as a whole. It's not just Dan Riccio, it's the decision of our top chiefs, our top government officers. They do it up at the Gilliard in the war, we call it the war room.
Right.
And so it's not just one person making that decision, actually. It's a cohesive group of city leaders making that decision.
What's good with the carriage companies in your mind?
What's good? Why the question?
Again, this is Quintin, Washington's Quintin's close-ups. I get to ask the questions.
I'm trying to feel the background for it. Okay?
What's good? What's good about the carriages? I know everybody's complaining about it, but what's good in your mind? What do you see good in the carriage company?
It's a pretty picture, isn't it?
Let me ask you this. Have you ever been on the carriage ride?
Let's see. 22 years ago, my grandfather came to visit, and he was frail, and he wanted to take a tour of the city. And 22 years ago, I wasn't living here, by the way. I've only been here 21.
Right.
But my grandfather was very frail, and he was about to die. And he wanted to have a tour around Charleston. So I don't think pedicabs were here back then. I don't think, by car. So we took a carriage ride. And we only took it 2 blocks, by the way. And it was provided by the hotel. And he was able to see Charleston as he remembered it for the last time. So yes, I have taken a carriage ride.
How long do you hope the carriage company will be in business?
I don't know the future of it because of development.
Okay.
It's a question of how the industry, the carriage industry, and the city, and development goes on in the city. You have to look at the land mass. Land is very expensive here, as you know. And you have to look at what's going on with the market. When is the market renovation going to start? When is Samara construction going to start? When is the new drainage project going to start? It all ties in together. And so I don't have a crystal ball because the city's changing and evolving as development grows in a slow manner, hopefully. But you have a lot of other impacts that are going to affect that industry. So I can't answer that question unless I know what development's going on or where they're going to go. Or you see the city progressing up the peninsula. Is there opportunity there? I don't know, and I haven't been privy to the carriage owners' conversations about their future development.
Let me turn over to the audit. Obviously, Mayor Tecklenburg was just recently audited by an outside independent counsel. When you look back to the audit to right now, what still plays in your mind, Angela?
The necessity of why wasn't it taken into a private manner? We know that those that deem the audit necessary, they have their reasons. But in a sense, the audit costs the taxpayers a lot of money.
How much?
I think around 60, 70,000 in some total. And that is taxpayer money, by the way. And, it was expensive. Those that felt that needed to be done, so it was done. And I have to support those that made that decision because they do represent us. But at the same time, the audit, he and Sandy were fine in the end. And it was a lot of energy, a lot of time was spent on City Council's dime and time on this audit when we have very important issues that need to be addressed right now.
You talk about the taxpayers' money. Taxpayers' money was being allegedly spent on birthday parties and newspaper ads and, of course, the business cards. What do you say to the average taxpayer in the city of Charleston?
Well, the procedure needed to be in play. There wasn't a proper procedure as far as what he could and should and would and do. I think when you enter any office, usually you're given, I know when I take a new job, I'm given a manual. This is what you do. This is how you do it. This is the form. I had to do this last night. This is the form that you send in because this is the law. This is how you have signatures. You have dates. You have times.
Right.
I know ahead of time what my expectations and what I should do. And perhaps that was the problem. Those were not set in place properly.
going forth, what do you want the city of Charleston to do to make certain that this doesn't happen again?
Hopefully by this time, by our conversation, they already have that in play.
Okay. Let me get back to obviously the first district. Well, obviously District 1. What is the top business in District 1 when you look around this area here in Daniel Island?
Business as far as what needs to be done or concerns?
Well, the top business in District 1. What's that top business that brings in a lot of money to this district? What's the top?
Well, in Ansonborough and the French Quarter is tourism.
Okay.
Let's face that. And we shouldn't forget about the hotels because but that's directly and indirectly affects tourism. In Daniel Island, it's the companies that are out there. Look at Beneficus, look at Blackball, look at the IT industry, tech. That's a tech corridor. Ernie did a really good job. Who's with IT.
Yeah, right.
He did a few people know this. Daniel Island is a tech corridor. So if you place your business there, their economic benefits, just as you would moving a Volvo or Boeing into play where they receive tax benefits, those benefits, much smaller of course, but beneficial, are there on Daniel Island. It's an IT corridor that actually goes up a little bit of Cane Hoy, where they're developing up 41.
Sure.
And so that is a huge business for Daniel Island, and Cane Hoy is also in District 1. So by that IT corridor being there, you have great companies that are already in play that are on Daniel Island.
What about widening 526? Where are you with that discussion?
Well, that's an interesting question because as we continue to grow, sometimes people think widening roads and bringing more roads will ease the traffic flow. 526 does need to be completed.
Okay.
If we would have completed it 12 years ago, we would have had a nice little beltway that went around Charleston. Now, because of our growth, we may need a nice little beltway going up to Somerville. So that does need to be completed.
Let me get back to, you talked earlier about the economic benefits of District 1. What are the economic benefits from the carriage industry?
Well, they can't be on Daniel Island.
No, I mean, in this downtown, I mean downtown. That's what I'm saying.
Right now, the economic benefits are the franchise agreements with the city.
Explain that. How do you define that to the average citizen?
You pay to play. You have a carriage. You pay a fee to the city in order to work and contain a business license in that city.
Well, how about the residents who are complaining about the carriage companies? Is that pay to play as well?
Well, that's why we had the task force meet about the carriage companies. Okay. The flow's been evenly distributed. In fact, it may be distributed more into developing neighborhoods that are coming along. You know this, you're from here. Ansonborough 25 years ago wasn't the Ansonborough of today. Neither was Mazik-Ragborough. Neither, with those coming in and moving into neighborhoods. But the great thing about Ansonborough is we still have those that lived there 35 to 40 years ago. It's very much still a community. We still have potluck dinners. We still gather at people's homes for breakfast when someone's sick. We still know everyone in the neighborhood. The same with the French Quarter. There's still that sense of community. You love your neighbor. You love your neighborhood. It's a great place to live.
Great place to live. Do you know how government operates?
Which one?
City.
I find it an interesting web that we weave, and I do know to a sense how it works. I'm not a city employee, so I don't know the internal developments, but I've been involved with the city offices and the different departments enough to know that I have relationships and pretty good relationships with them.
What's your relationship with livability and tourism?
Well, we have a strong relationship because of the nature of the business. Livability and tourism affects our neighborhoods, Ansonborough and the French Quarter. So livability is just not about horses. It's also about trash pickup. It's about neighbor-to-neighbor issues. It's about transportation. It's about police and enforcement. It's about parks. It's about cleanliness of our neighborhood. It's also Dan Riccio. I'm sure he has ID on his phone because when I call, it's like, oh, here's Angela again. But here's Angela. And so, but it's good that we have those numbers and those contacts within the city that we know that if we have something to address, it'll be addressed, and it may be not taken care of within an hour or two, but it will be streamlined to the right department. Parking enforcement, Keith Benjamin in transportation, Robbie, who's an angel. He won't like that I said that, but he's a great guy. Our police chief, our new police chief, our old police chief, those entities within the city halls are Gary White.
Yes.
He's responded. Mike Seekins has responded. Dudley,
Right.
Waring.
Right.
We're fortunate, and I left out Moody and Shay.
All of them I know.
But they're all approachable and they're all accessible.
Right.
And that's the key. As long as we all communicate, as long as we're transparent, and as long as a need is addressed, and there's some response, it can be, yes, I can take care of it, or let me find someone who can. That's what our city's all about.
You talk about communication. Is the mayor communicating a lot that he should to city council in your mind?
That's something that they would have to address. And that's something, if elected, 42 days, my friend, that's something that I hope that we'll all work together with. I feel like it's all about relationships.
Okay.
We're all from different districts, but we all represent the people of Charleston.
Yes.
And we all have different concerns, even within the district. And it's important to communicate that perhaps Councilman Mitchell needs help in this direction with his neighborhood on the east side, and maybe how can we help and what can we do and what resources can we utilize? What does Councilman Waring need over in Avondale regarding the rooftop ordinance?
Right.
What does, there's different needs, it's different, but we can all meet together and work together and communicate that maybe you need this, I need this, we can work together on this issue, but also knowing ahead of time before we reach city council chambers how we can work this out. Because you know what? We aren't going to agree all the time, but we can agree to disagree, and we can agree to agree. And as long as we know the position and where we stand, it makes it a better place to be in.
Let me ask you a two-part question. Has the mayor's office been transparent with the citizens of the city of Charleston? And has the city council been transparent with its citizens?
If I don't know something and I have a question, I call. And so I've always hopefully had great involvement with the residents of my neighborhood and with the city, so that if I have a question or I need something answered, I can usually find out the answer. I keep my ear to the ground so that, like you, I know about current issues and what's going on. So I don't wait on them to reach out to me. I reach out to them.
What answers do you want from the Dutch dialogues?
I want to know the direction of the future. We have questions all the time about where are we going to get a grant from or monies from, and we pretty much know this is going to be a federal issue with us, and that takes years in order to receive those monies. It's not going to be something that's answered in 2 years or 5 years. You have to look at the length of the project. It may even be 10 years out. We've started the conversation. The Dutch dialogues will have their conclusion tonight. The next answer is, where do we go for funding for these projects, and assess the needs of priorities. West Ashley, the Battery,
Sure.
Concord.
Sure.
There's even a flooding issue on Daniel Island, by the way. So we need to have a proper assessment outside of the Dutch dialogues even of current needs, what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, and funding involved.
You talk about that flooding on Daniel Island. How do we get here with that?
Pardon?
Flooding on Daniel Island. How do we get here with that?
Because Daniel Island's in my district, and I'm concerned with Daniel Island.
Let me put you aside. What about the residents who are concerned about the future and when it comes to flooding on Daniel Island?
Well, Daniel Island's already been addressed. City Council approved in the budget this past week. It was a very small stipulant for stormwater drainage treatment on Daniel Island. It's off of Farr Street, Farr.
Right,
so that's already been addressed.
But how do you address flooding in the future?
you look at the Dutch dialogues, you see what the report is stating tonight, it'd be public, and then also take that assessment along with other assessments that list those priorities. What areas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's going to be part of a huge puzzle that we have to address. And then the next is funding.
Well, where's the infrastructure?
Where is infrastructure? That's why we have the flooding. There is not a good infrastructure right now as far as the flooding, maintaining flooding within the city.
In the city. Before I go, who else is Angela Drake?
I'm Angela Drake. This is me. I've lived in the city for 21 years. I love the city. I'm married to a Charlestonian, and I appreciate the city for what it is and what it's been and where we can take the city to the next level of understanding the comprehensiveness of flooding, tourism, transportation. It all comes under the theme of the challenges of prosperity. The challenges of prosperity of those that we've grown, we're growing, where do we take that growth, and underneath that growth, that umbrella of growth are the issues: infrastructure, transportation, flooding, and livability, maintaining the quality of life.
What challenges do we have when it comes to late night and alcohol licenses in the city of Charleston?
We addressed that actually in the late night committee. That was under Chief Mellon
Right.
5 years ago.
Right.
So if you look back at that report, when we were walking, the task force was actually walking the streets from 12 to 4 a.m.
Right.
And it was, and you know, nothing good happens after midnight, as my grandmother used to say. So for me to be walking the streets from 12 to 4, it was amazing. But we addressed those issues. If you look at the late night task force report, things such as bar closures, hours of operation, liquor licensing, regulation of those enforcing within the bar system. We actually had restaurant owners, bar owners, policemen, citizens, neighborhoods, those involved with the liquor industry, the food and beverage business. Steve Palmer, who's
Right.
amazing, was a part of
I know him
that.
very well.
Bill Hall.
Right.
The developers up King Street won't let me name their names, but they were all there. They in Blind Tiger. But no, we had a lot of restaurateurs, people in the food and beverage industry, people from the city, livability, the police department, the fire department. All of those entities came together for this report, and in a way that reflects upon that report and the short-term rental task force sort of has its influence on the hotel ordinance and the rooftop ordinance that are coming up. But yes, those late night issues, the bars, the liquor licensing, all of that, those were addressed in that report.
But wait, you all have obviously tourism. You have obviously, city. Well, the city department obviously had tourism officers during the day. What about tourism officers during the night?
Livability officers?
Yes, ma'am.
The livability officers are out there in the market actually later than you think.
Okay.
Because there are public there's like a music festival, they have an art walk right in the market.
Sure.
So as long as these public areas are open, they're there. And also the police force actually has special zones for different restaurants, market openings, areas up past, north of Calhoun.
Right.
They have different districts that actually, after the bars close, the police officers and enforcement there actually go into the neighborhoods because that's where everyone leaving the bar goes.
Sure.
So to enforce safety, public issues, public safety mainly, and the safety of those leaving the bars too, they have patrols that go within the fingers of the boroughs too. And pretty much where you have tourism, there are officers there. Actually, where there is tourism, there's officers there, and they're also within the neighborhoods ensuring their safety. In Ansonborough and the French Quarter. I know that just from personal experiences.
Where's that special zone when it comes to pedicabs?
Pedicabs have pretty much, they have a license agreement. They can't be tour guides, of
Right.
course. And I don't see as many pedicabs in our neighborhood. That, of course, their office is right there. But I see more pedicabs in the market, and I see Upper King than I see going through our neighborhood. It's more of a safety issue because
Sure.
they're bicycles, and I think they've developed their routes so that they aren't on the main thoroughfares.
Right. Let me get back to that report, that 5-year report.
Mhm.
If you were to pull off that report now, 5 years later, what recommendations would you add to that report?
The bar scenes have changed and grown further up King Street.
Okay.
So I would just say enhancing what they have now. And they probably do this. I just haven't been on Upper King. I apologize, in about 6 months. Upper King, and that's where that's all going. Of course, the restaurants are up here, and this and that, but I don't go bar hopping anymore. So, it's their enforcement, I would presume, I haven't talked to Chief Reynolds about this, is going up that way.
Okay.
That's something that I would need to look into. So I can't really speak to it in an educated manner.
Angela Drake, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Anytime. Sorry to be tough on you.
Oh, bring it on.